Thank you, Karen. Let's give it up one more time for Karen. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me back. I wasn't supposed to be here, but I was meant to be here.
That's right.
So I'd like to start with a question. Why couldn't the thief understand sarcasm? He took things literally.
Okay.
I'm glad some of you laughed at that one. So the title of my talk is An Understanding Mind. So on that note, I'm gonna start with, and we touched on it already, what the power of understanding is, which is the ability to know and to perceive, to comprehend. And we also know that our Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore would set a disciple to each of the 12 powers. And surprise, surprise, the disciple that goes with this is Thomas, also known as Doubting Thomas. Yeah, he needed to see the wounds on Jesus before he believed, right? So, but there's not really anything wrong with that, right? It's good to at least want to understand why something is happening. So hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. So, understanding, which is related to wisdom, is something we need to strive for and make it a priority. This is from my own take, what I've learned to understand, that we need to make it a priority. And once we find it, we need to move forward with it. We need to take action on it, right? We talk about here the 5th principle of unity, which is about taking action. It's not just enough to know the principles, but you must take action. I've said it before, if you know something but you don't do anything about it, it's the same as not knowing it, right? See, you guys can finish my sentence. So on that note, I want to mention a couple of verses from the Bible that specify about how important understanding and the wisdom of this understanding is. And the first one is from Proverbs chapter 4, verses 5 through 7. And I am reading from the New Revised Standard Version, which instead of saying understanding says insight. And I decided to leave that one in there because insight is that developed understanding. So I hope that makes sense. So I'm gonna go ahead and read it. We read, get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget nor turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever else you get insight. Like I mentioned, insight being that developed understanding, or that spiritual understanding. And the next verse is from 1 Kings chapter 3, and is verses 5 through 13. And I won't read everything, but I'll give you the gist of it and maybe read some of it. So this is, if you might remember, this is where King Solomon has a dream, and God appears to him in his dream, and God says to him, ask what I should give you. And Solomon goes on to say he's very grateful for what he has, for being a king, even above his father David. And even though he has all those things, he doesn't want more power, more riches. What he says is, give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, able to discern between good and evil, for who can govern this great people of yours? It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. God said to him, because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches, or for the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right. I now do according to your word. Indeed, I give you a wise and discerning mind. No one like you has been before you, and no one like you shall arise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, all your life. So I think this is pretty self-explanatory, right? He focused on getting true wisdom, understanding. And because of that, he gets that, but not only does he get that wisdom, he also gets riches and anything else that he might desire. And so I'm here, I guess you could say as an example, I really have, I'm gonna say, attempt to follow that wisdom. Before I went into ministerial school, and I knew that I was working on my spiritual self and all that, and I thought, I need to somehow go and do other things besides my regular 9-to-5 job so that I can get more money, so that I can really work on my spiritual self. And I tried that for a few years. And guess what happened? It didn't work. When I gave that up and I focused only on my spiritual work, on my wisdom, my understanding, then everything started falling into place. I thought that I was gonna have to move out of Orlando where we live and go to the village in Lee Summit, Missouri. And I thought I was gonna have to be away for 2 or 3 years going to school, because that's the way it used to be done back a few years back. But that's when I found out that there was, one of the schools was the Unity Urban Ministerial School, which they were the originators of the online ministerial program for Unity. And when I found that out, it's like, okay, I don't have to leave home. I can just do it from the comfort of my home, get online, follow that, and of course working with everything else, taking the SEE credits that I'm sure some of you know. So everything fell into place when I focused only on that wisdom and that understanding. So, in case you haven't noticed, technically there's two types of understanding: intellectual understanding and spiritual understanding. Now, the intellectual understanding, as you guess, is what we get from the outside, from our 5 senses, you know, what you see, what you hear, what you read. And that spiritual understanding is when you go within to get that light of understanding within you, to really look for your Christ consciousness, as we like to call it here. So that's the basic difference in intellectual and spiritual understanding. Now, this is not to say that intellectual understanding is wrong. Who thinks that that's what it is? Intellectual understanding is not really wrong, it's just incomplete. It's just not the full picture. I've talked about here other people that I noticed, that I started reading, and they were very much in the intellect, but because of the work they did, they moved from the intellect into the spiritual. So that's what I'm asking everyone here to consider when you're going day to day about your life, about what you're doing, what you think you might want to do. And just consider day to day, ask, give me spiritual understanding. I actually read this next from a book called, which I'm gonna do after, a book called A 12-Power Meditation. I'm not gonna do the whole 12 powers, but I'm gonna just do right up to where we are right now in the month of July. And from here, I read where, his name is Reverend Charles Broth, by the way. And he mentions the difference between intellectual and spiritual. We can consider what John the Baptist is as to Jesus. John the Baptist came saying that he was waiting for someone, that he was leading the way, he was pointing the way to the Christ. He was not the way, John the Baptist. He was showing the way, and Jesus was the way. He was our spiritual master, if you will. So yes, we can only go so far intellectually, but we really need to focus on how can we get past the intellect into the spiritual. Because if you're here, I think you agree with me that the spiritual is where you're gonna get the highest wisdom that you can. In the intellect, we can get as much information as we want. We can read all the books that we want from everybody, and we still will not have, as I like to call them, all the facts. You never know why you have to do something or read something or why it's happening to you, because in the spiritual, that's what really has your ultimate wisdom. Along those lines, and you probably heard of this also, about the finger pointing to the moon. Has anybody heard that about? This comes from, apparently Buddha was explaining to his disciple Ananda the difference about focusing on your true wisdom and just going through the motions, reading things. He was saying that the finger pointing to the moon is what you read, what you learn, maybe even what you do. But the true wisdom is the moon itself. And I'm gonna say most of us grew up with that idea. We're focusing so much on the finger pointing to the moon that we forget to be awakened by really looking to the moon instead. We get caught up in, I'm gonna say it, scripture, dogma, the law. As Jesus said, he didn't come here to break the law, but he came here to extend, to make it happen. And he said, it's not the word of the law that we need to focus on, is the spirit of the law. So I see that resemblance in that. Instead of looking at your finger pointing at the moon, just go ahead and look at the moon, right? And yes, understanding is, I mean, the way I see it, like I was mentioning before, and I know you've all had some kind of, no pun intended, understanding about this. You've had moments where you did what you had to do, maybe in your job, your career. You learned by reading, by following, by getting the example from others. But you truly didn't understand or really get something till you did it yourself. Does that ring true? Yeah. Right? So we need to focus on direct experience. Without that direct experience, there's really not the same. And I know, and I think I've mentioned this before here, when you have that direct experience of the spiritual, it is something that you can't even put into words, right? So how can you possibly put anything into words or write it down? I cannot stand here and tell you something and expect that what I'm saying is gonna have you have some spiritual experience unless you're ready for it yourself. I can guide you towards that experience, but it is for you to experience that. Does that sound good?
Yes.
I mean, I wish I could do that every time, but maybe ask for it as we go. So yes, remember, focus on going from your intellectual understanding, moving into that spiritual understanding. And how do we do that? You're gonna be very surprised when I tell you. Pray and meditate. Right? When you go into meditation, consider maybe, if you want to focus on that power of understanding, to focus on your spiritual center of understanding, which is at your forehead, your front lobe. and consider asking, how can I get spiritual understanding on whatever it is that I am doing today, tomorrow, the next week? Maybe a project that you're working on. How can I get a spiritual understanding from this? So you can just keep working on that. Every time that you meditate, focus on that. I understand also that if you think about the power of the month for last month was imagination. Where was that? Between your eyes, or what we might call the third eye. The power for this month, understanding. The forehead also. And guess what? Next month, the power of will is also at your forehead. We got these three centers, energy centers, in the same area. So maybe it's good to work on those together. Because when you get that spiritual understanding, a lot of the times we get images, right? We get that, we can envision an understanding. And then when we get that understanding, if there's something for us to do, we must take action. So that's why I would say those three go together: understanding, imagination, and will. Of course, as you guess, imagination, of course, is the power to visualize, to envision, and the power of will is the power to actually take action, to choose, and to command. So consider that as you move through your week. So focus on your understanding from day to day, whenever you're doing anything. Ask, what is it that I need to understand spiritually from this? And I was getting ahead of myself, so I'm gonna, and bear with me, I might be stretching it a little bit here. The first one, not so much, but the second one. So, the way I see my spiritual work, yes, I started with reading, watching things, listening to things. And it was after a while practicing, reading, but most importantly, when I started meditating, is when I started truly getting spiritual wisdom. And I think a simple way to explain it, I've mentioned it here before, and I think some of you practice it also. Who practices A Course in Miracles here? Okay, a couple of people. A Course in Miracles, it's, if you don't know anything about it, it could be very complicated. The way it is written is like you have to stop yourself from thinking that you know what you're gonna read next. You know, when you're reading something, you kind of guess what's coming. The way it is written, you have to stop yourself because I forget the word, the pentatonic, all right, I forget the name of it. But anyway, it is written in a way that you have to really stop yourself and really pay attention to what you're reading. And even if you read it through, it's got the text, it's got the workbook, and it's got the manual, and a couple other ones. But if you just read through the text, you might understand some things. But if you don't do the workbook, the lessons, the 365 lessons that are there for each day of the year, you truly will not have gotten that spiritual understanding of the book. I've asked people about A Course in Miracles, and they'll say, "Oh yeah, I read it." I'm like, "But do you do the lessons?" "No, I didn't do the lessons. I didn't need to." So I know that that person didn't really get it. You have to experience it, was what I was saying. You have to have that direct experience of that spiritual that you cannot even understand. It is something that happens to you. You shift. I remember it happened maybe a few months, maybe 6 months after I got to really going through the lessons, that it just kind of fell into place without me realizing it, because it was an experience that I needed to have. And yes, it tells you, when you do certain things, you wanna act a certain way, whatever. And I knew that it had happened for me because I've mentioned it before here, I used to work at the convention center in Orlando. Huge, well, there's 2 buildings, it's like over 2 million square feet of exhibit space and meeting rooms, you name it. And I worked with audio lighting and the cable system there. And we would set up what we call the house lighting for productions that came in. They do their own lighting, theatrical and all that, but we made sure that we gave them a remote so that they can turn off certain sections of the exhibit space that they were so they can have their own lighting. And somebody had not done it for them. And the production manager was fuming. And I had to go and answer to this person. And he was cursing up a storm up and down, calling me the F word and everything. Not directly to me by saying you guys, right? And it was interesting that normally, and this was a guy yay big and yay big. I'm not that big to begin with, right? I could have easily gotten scared or even gotten upset. But for some reason, I had been practicing the course. And I just let him be. And all I did was, I apologize. I will get this straightened out for you. Didn't say anything else. And I started walking away. He had been yelling at me. As I walk away, he stops me. He's like, I'm sorry, but I just need to make it right for my clients. And I apologize for what I said to you. I didn't try, and I was fine with it. From that moment on, a few times I saw him again for the shows. He was so happy to see me every time. So yes, get your experience of that spiritual enlightenment, that awakening, so that you can move through life in the flow of life. You know, I've mentioned before, like a river, just go with it. Wherever it takes you, be okay with it. Don't try to intellectualize everything that's happening to you, because in simple terms, it can drive you crazy, right? So I've mentioned here before, and so the second thing I want to touch on, and is because today, July 26th, is my dad's birthday, and he's been gone for a couple of years now. So in honor of him, I thought, what can I incorporate? And maybe I can think of as a family. He came from a life that he didn't go a single day to school, but he taught himself how to read and write throughout his life. When he came to the US, he had never taken an English class. While he was here, he never took an English class, but he taught himself how to speak in English. Yes, it was a little chopped out, but he managed to get around with no education. What I got from him was that determination and that willingness to do the work. So I like to picture between the two of us from that intellectual understanding, hopefully into the spiritual understanding that I'm working towards right now. And God willing, my girls maybe will, at some point I'm gonna say, will take from that and learn from it. And I know from early on that they are much smarter than I am to begin with. So hopefully they can use that to keep going and moving forward our family lineage, if you will, into the spiritual realm. So I'd like to leave you with a quote, and I'm sure you've heard of Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. He says, knowing others is intelligence. Knowing yourself is true wisdom. Mastering others is strength. Mastering yourself is true power.